Hi everyone, I hope you guys are all well. It's Saturday morning, it's chucking it down with rain, it's cold, it's windy, it's horrible. So I'm spending the day at home reading. I want to just give you a progress report on how I'm doing with Les Miserables. I'm 2 weeks in and I am 408 pages in. Now, as you know, this is like a 1,200 page book. So you're thinking, oh, I'm not that far in. It's been a couple of weeks. It might take a couple of weeks longer. Well, I'm hoping not, because I have now finished work for a week. I've got a week off. I am so happy. I have worked. I haven't had a break from work for 10 weeks. And yeah, I've probably built up about 30 hours of flexi in those 10 weeks. So I've been working really, really hard. So this week I intend to sit, relax, read, sleep, and do nothing much else. So I am pretty sure that by next weekend I would have completed Les Miserables and I'll be able to get my full review to you. But anyway, that is the progress report over. I want to focus on something else. Now, this has all come about from a reunion that's kind of happened this week. I got a message on Facebook from a woman called Laura who said, I think we were best friends when we were 5 years old. And she gave me a load of information saying, I think this is you, can you tell me? And I replied back and said, yes, it's me. And we both couldn't believe that we found each other on Facebook, because it was the reason why we kind of got separated was I moved away. I moved hundreds of miles away, the other end of the country, and we had a couple of letters back and forth, but we just lost connection to each other entirely until this week when we've managed to find each other through Facebook, and it was just so crazy. So we've had a really great time chatting with each other, getting to know each other as adults. It's been absolutely lovely, and it's made me think a lot about my childhood. And so this video is kind of formed, and I want to talk about my love for animation. Animation is something I was introduced very young, and it's something that I am still very passionate about. And people go, oh, but you know, you're in your 30s, you shouldn't be interested in animation films anymore. Bollocks, absolute bollocks. I'm sorry, it's an art form and I love art. You know me, you know I love anything artistic. I love films, I love stories. It's what means the most to me. So someone telling me that I shouldn't like that, I'm just like, whatever. So I want to talk about animation from my past, and you know, as a child, animation from adulthood, things that I really recommend, things that I've learnt, and I think it's because of animation that I really have a love for stories, you know, because it's very strange. I can remember, like, obviously when I was very, very young, being read stories when I was little, you know, at bedtime and such. But then when you think about as you know, things that culture, when it enters your world, when you're like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, you know, it was animation. It was the golden age of Disney animation. And I can like vividly remember doing things like when Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King came out on video. Me and my sister didn't get to see them in the cinema, so we took this special trip to Asda. Mum and Dad took us on a special trip to Asda. We got a special tea and we bought the video and we sat and watched them together whilst having tea. It was, you know, it's things like that. I distinctly remember, and I distinctly remember these specific 5 films, which are not Disney, which kind of defined my childhood, and they are really quite incredibly dark, so maybe that's why I really like dark stories. I don't know. So the 5 that just, wow, I still love watching these films even as an adult are An American Tail. This is the first one because they did multiple films, but it's the very first one. The Land Before Time, again, the very first one. This one they did like 20 sequels or something crazy like that, but they were all kind of Disneyfied and they all had songs and all that lot. The first one certainly doesn't. All Dogs Go to Heaven, Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, and the BFG. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually. So American Tail is a Don Bluth film, and this, they did do, I think it was 3 films in the end. I can certainly remember seeing 2 of them. But An American Tail basically tells a story of a Russian family of mice who whose country is overwhelmed by cats who attack them, you know, and everything, and destroy their village where they've lived very happily. And they get on a boat and go to America because there are no cats in America, as it's a key song that's sung in the film. And they realise actually there are cats, but on the boat ride, the youngest of the family, Philly, he gets well, he's Feifel, but when they go to America, he has his name is like changed to Philly. On the boat ride over, he gets shipwrecked. He gets thrown overboard because he's curious about looking at fish during a storm, and he gets washed up in America. But his family don't know that he's alive, and his sister gets her name changed to Tilly because it's an easier name basically in America, and his friends who he meets in America changes his name from Feifel to Philly, and it's all about him trying to find his family. They're dealing with the cats that are in America, and there's this, you know, this whole big thing of a plan. All the mice get together and get rid of all the cats in New York and everything. It's an absolutely fantastic film, and apparently this came out like when I was about 2 months old, I think it is, or something like that. And this was the first film that I saw. Mum and Dad took my sister and me to go see it. And it was the first film that I ever saw. You know, I have no memory of it whatsoever, of course, because I was only a couple of months old. But it's an absolutely beautiful film about immigration, as you can probably tell from what I just described. But the love of family, and the family have this great passion for music, and it's music that bring them together, that hold them together, and help them find each other. And it's such a beautiful representation of a family's love. And so I just absolutely adore it. They did, as I said, they did a sequel which was Feifel Goes West, where it was the gold rush of America, and once again Feifel gets separated from his family and he needs to find them again, and there's this whole thing of in the West there are these like cowboys and you know, dealing with all of them. So it is a kind of it doesn't feel like it doesn't have the same depth. It doesn't have the same heart. Like when Feifel, the whole, you know, reunion with his family, that's not really a big spoiler because it's a kids' film. You know they're going to get reunited. It's incredibly emotional in the first film, and it chokes me up to this day. The second one is a bit like, well, you're just doing a naff remake of what you did before, and it's not really well put together, you know, that kind of thing. I think there might have been a third one, but I'm really not sure. So that's why I've only got a copy of the first one, but I really strongly recommend this. It's absolutely beautifully put together. And Don Bluth also did Thumbelina, but he also did the very dark All Dogs Go to Heaven. I was absolutely obsessed with this film when I was a kid. I think I pretty much wore out the video copy that we had. So All Dogs Go to Heaven is focused around Charlie, who's there, a lovely dog there, and his friend, and how they're in cahoots with this kind of mob boss character. He's there, quite a mean doggy, and in the process of dealing with with this mob boss guy, they basically, Charlie gets kind of killed and he gets sent to heaven, and Charlie doesn't want to go to heaven. Charlie wants to get back to the real world. He wants to live, so he sneaks his way out of heaven and goes back to Earth, and he's kind of given, in a sense, a second chance, even though he actually hot-footed it out of heaven himself. He didn't earn it, in a sense. His friend, that's Itchy, his friend. I forgot to mention his name. He was this really, really great sidekick character, and in the process of going back and getting back into his old ways and everything, they meet this orphan who is kidnapped by our mob boss character, and they meet this orphan who got kidnapped by him, and she is called Anne-Marie, and she has this ability to talk to animals. And what she does is that they make her to talk to animals that are going to do horses at horse races to win loads of money. But they tell her that they're going to help her find her family and everything. She's desperate to find her family if they do it for her, and it's all about this, the way in which they're using her and everything, but they form this kind of really strange little family. But it's an incredibly dark film at the same time, because you have this thing of Charlie battling time, this awful sequence with drowning is involved near the end, how much he loves this little girl, even though he claims he really does not that fond of her. He truly loves her. When Itchy, there's this awful sequence where Itchy is nearly beaten to death in it. It's so sad, it's so powerful, and the ending with Charlie having his moment of realization and saying goodbye and everything, it's still to this day, it chokes me up. It's truly dark. It has some really great songs in there, because obviously it's a kids' film. But I think Don Bluth had this ability, just as he showed with American Tail. He kind of showed it with Thumbelina, but Thumbelina is so sugar-coated. It's really... you can tell it's his style, but you can tell it's somebody else who wrote it. Well, no, I think he did write it, but you know what I mean. It's very completely separate. It's like this is something that he's been contracted to do, Thumbelina, for Disney, whereas this is truly where his heart is, that he really loves to do. It's very dark, it's very gothic, but it's so beautiful. And I love how Charlie, he really likes to help his friend who's got a load of little puppies, and she, to bring them, he brings them food and all stuff like that. He has a heart of gold, even though he's bit of a bad guy, but I absolutely love Old Dog Go to Heaven. Now, The Land Before Time, I was really annoyed when I ordered this DVD, because the cover was advertised as being the actual poster, which is very dark. It's got a volcano, a big T-Rex and everything, and all of the gang that are involved in this. And what did I get? That. Yeah, not good. So basically, The Land Before Time follows a group of dinosaurs who are they're not associated, but they kind of know each other, and it's very much they're very much told that they keep to their own kind. They don't integrate. They and everything. And the main character is our little friend here. He's called Littlefoot. And Littlefoot lives with his mother and his grandparents, and then one day a great big volcano completely destroys the area where they live, and Littlefoot's mother saves him and another character called Sarah from a T-Rex, or Sharptooth as he's known to them, and she's sadly killed, but she tells him before she dies that there is a land that it's fully protected, it has all the food that everyone could possibly need, and she tells him a direction to go to get to this land. And the rest of the film is about Littlefoot and these various species of dinosaur that he meets along the way, going together, working together to get to this magical land and live life very happily. This is actually a Steven Spielberg and George Lucas film. You wouldn't think it, but it is, and it's absolutely fantastic. It is very rough, and when I say rough, I mean because you see some really quite graphic dinosaur fights and that kind of thing. You wouldn't think it's one of these films. I'm going to alert you to another film that I've got here on my sofa as well, where you look at this, you go, "Oh, a youth certificate. It must be fine." No, it's not. It's not. The classification system has changed drastically since this was classified as a U certificate. This is not a U certificate film, but it's a really, really decent film. All of the other, like I said, sequels where they did loads of songs and they very much Disneyfied everything, those you can class as a U certificate, no problem. But this is a bit darker, a bit more sinister, and it's absolutely wonderfully drawn. It's so realistic in its animation, just like I would say the same for All Dogs Go to Heaven and American Tail. But yeah, it's very much, it looks at things like depression, because when Littlefoot gets separated from his family and his mother dying, friendship, family, loyalty, fear. There are so many themes in this film, and it's incredibly darkly drawn. All three of those films so far are hand-drawn animation, and All Dogs Go to Heaven is pretty dark, but The Land Before Time is really, really dark in the colour palette and everything, which you can understand until they reach the end, and it's full of vibrant colour, and it's wonderful to watch. Now, the next one was one that I suppose I only really knew about thanks to my aunt and uncle, because they filmed it, they recorded it, shall I say, off the telly onto a VHS tape for me and my sister, and gave it to us, and I obsessively watched them wore the tape out, and that's Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, which has fantastic jokes in it. It's beautifully drawn, and it has the amazing Robin Williams playing Batty. I absolutely love Batty in this. So what this is about is a girl called Krista, fairy called Krista, who lives in Fern Gully, which is a rainforest, and she's basically learning to take over from the head fairy when time comes for her to do so, and she finds that her rainforest is being cut down, and she doesn't understand. She's a bit weird in understanding this, because humans and fairies are very separate things. There was this very dark entity, because it tells you about the history of Fern Gully in the very beginning, with these beautiful animations, almost like cave drawings, wonderfully constructed. And in the process of telling you the story, you learn that there was this dark entity called Hexus that was captured in a tree by the fairies, and he's still captured in this tree. But the humans are now coming through to cut down the rainforest, and in the process of this film, the tree with Hexus gets cut into, and he is released, and he's basically a poison. He absolutely adores all the oil and the gas and everything that these machines work off, the petrol. And he's this sinister, like crawling entity, squishy entity that's moving around, and just splashes onto the walls, and the walls start to disintegrate like acid. And then he turns into this kind of like a mass cloud, and at one point he's completely skeletal, dripping in oil. It's really dark, really sinister, but he's absolutely fantastic. But with Hexus released from the tree, Krista accidentally turns one of the humans into a very small version of himself, a guy called Zach, and because she gets a fairy spell wrong, she says fairy, because a tree's going to fall on him, and she uses the term fairy size instead of fairy eyes, because she wanted him to see the tree, but she made him tiny. And it's about him understanding the world of fairies and Fern Gully and everything, and seeing the magical and the things of the rainforest. And he basically becomes an activist for saving the rainforest in the end. So it was a really beautiful film because it looked at the world in a different way for me. It taught me things about the rainforest and how we should protect nature and all sorts like that. So learning lessons from animation is something that I've always loved. And like I said, it's incredibly dark. So thus, I wonder what, with the last film as well, because it's very dark, the way that it's shot and everything, and quite sinister. I think it's these 5 films which I automatically think of as defining my childhood are the reason why I really like dark stories. Yeah. And yeah, the last one that I list of 5 is the BFG. Now, this is obviously an adaptation of the Roald Dahl book. There has been a more recent adaptation that Steven Spielberg did, which was like not stop motion, sorry. Oh no, what's it called? No, it's just completely fallen out of my head, the technique used, because it's a mixture of live action and also, well, in a sense it is live action for the BFG, but he's sort of animated as well, and you know, with the dots all over him and everything. But this is fully drawn animation with David Jason providing the voice of BFG. I absolutely loved his depiction of BFG and how playful he was. But he could at the same time be incredibly stubborn, very stern as well, and really showed fear of you know, in the form of the character when he's with the other giants as well, which I really love, because the BFG, it showed his complexities as a character, and I absolutely love that. So the BFG follows a little girl called Sophie, right there, who lives in an orphanage, and which she very much hates, and she's basically, they're all treated terribly at this orphanage. And one day she goes to her window and she sees a giant in the road, and he's sort of putting something into a horn and blowing it through the window, and he sees her, and because she has seen him, he reaches his hand into her bedroom window, picks her up and steals her and takes her away to his land, the land of the giants. And he explains that he's the BFG, which is the big friendly giant, and he basically, that concoction that he blew through a horn is a dream, a pleasant dream. But there are horrible giants in the land of giants who go and eat children. They snatch children out of their bedrooms and eat them. And it's all about them learning things from each other, kind of developing this family, and basically getting rid of the other giants and such, with the help of humans and the Queen. The Queen is a character in this. She's very well drawn, I have to say. She looks quite like her. So yes, so that is the BFG. It's beautifully drawn. There's only a couple of songs in this. One of them is all about farting, which, you know, it's, you know, British, you know, humour and everything, so they put it in, even though I don't recall it being in the book, but it's been so long since I read the book, so I was probably a kid the last time I read the book. Yeah, maybe I should reread it, I don't know. But it is very well constructed. David Jason plays him beautifully, and the ending is very emotional, and it's perfect. And I love the fact that they actually did the ending correctly, because Steven Spielberg's version, he messed with that book so much that he completely cocked up the whole point of the bloody book and changed the ending, and I was livid. I was livid about that ending. Yeah, I was like, okay, you can change all, you know, the various things that you did in the middle of the book, I'll accept that because it's a film version, but changing the ending, the whole point of the book, nah, can't accept that. So yeah, so out of the 2 BFG films, I recommend the animated one. Okay, so they were the top 5 from my childhood, but I want to talk about other films from my childhood, other animation I really recommend. Now, as I said, I kind of went through the golden age of animation for Disney. So I'm not going to show you every single Disney film and Made Under the Sun. These are there are a couple of Disney films on this, just as my top Disney films. But these are other animation films that or series which I watched and I absolutely adored as a kid. But again, they are really quite incredibly dark and such, and they really kind of defined my childhood. So again, it's another thing of, why do I love dark stories? Well, these animation films have got a pretty big thing to do with it. So the 2 Disney films which I picked as my absolute top Disney films are the animated, of course, Beauty and the Beast from the early 90s, and Fantasia. Fantasia gets a lot of stick, and I really don't like it. There are people who go, what is the point of this film? Really? It has no story. This, that, and other. It's a pointless film. No, it's not. What Disney wanted to do was to show power of animation in a different way than what had been presented previously, and he basically got his team to animate stories that centered around classical pieces of music. So there's beautiful things like the Four Seasons classical music. I love Winter especially, and with the fairies and each little all those notes are fairies tipping their wands against various flowers or down the strands of spiders' webs to make them into ice, bring winter into the land. And you see fairies that are still half asleep, and they're waking each other up by dropping water on their heads and stuff like that. All of these playful things. You also have the classic image, as you hear, of Mickey in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where he gets the apprentice's hat, and he because he doesn't want to sweep and such, so he basically makes the broom come to life and then makes more and more of them to do his jobs, but of course it completely falls apart and the sorcerer has to help him out in the end. You've got these weird and wonderful things like the hippo and the crocodile dance and such, and the mushrooms dancing, and the little baby mushroom having trouble trying to keep up, and it's an absolutely beautiful representation of linking 2 art forms, music and animation, and there's no dialogue. There is, well, okay, I lie. There is a little kind of introduction, but that's it. But it is incredibly dark as well, because obviously the darker music, classical music that there is, the darker the stories are. And you even have this one where it's like this devil-like figure who forms over this land and kind of takes control, and there's lots of lightning, and he's throwing these lightning bolts at these various characters to kill them and stuff like that. It's incredibly dark, but it's beautifully constructed, and I think it's an absolute gem of a piece of film. It's just a shame that there aren't more people who like it. And then, as I said, the classic, the wonderful, my absolute favourite. I'm sure you guys who have watched my various videos and will have known this by now, that this was going to appear at some point. Beauty and the Beast kind of defined my childhood for Disney films, because I loved Belle. I loved the fact that you had a woman, I suppose girl, because she's like 16, 17, but for me, she's a woman who loved to read, who had her own mind, who had her own personality, who didn't like the really handsome man who lives in her village, who all the other girls swoon over. She had her own thoughts, her own abilities, her own strength. and determination, and she saw the beauty in everything, and I absolutely loved that. And of course it's beautifully constructed. The fact that it got nominated for Best Film at the Oscars the following year, when no animation film had ever been put under that category. Animation was strictly for the animation categories only until that film happened. So it is a completely record-breaking, redefining film. So, and of course, yeah, there is this one as well, The Lord of the Rings. I grew up watching this film because, as you know, I adore Tolkien, and because of my dad and everything, and the Lord of the Rings films that we all love and know now, Peter Jackson films, which I all adore, obviously only came around in the early 2000s, and before that there was obviously the radio adaptations that the BBC did, and this animated film, and I love this animated film. It's really decent adaptation of the first 1.5 books. Unfortunately, they didn't have the funding to create the second film, because the plan was to do the 3 books in 2 films, and they didn't get the funding for the second film, which is so sad. But I absolutely love this. Some of the names and such are kind of phrased a bit wrong in case some of the animation is a bit blocky, a bit funny, but it's of its time. They were on a low budget, and you know, it is what it is, but I adore it. I absolutely adore it. Now these ones I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about, but I'll get through as quickly as I can because I realise I'm like 31 minutes in. That these other ones are really important to me, because yeah, they've meant a lot over the years. So the first one is The Animals of Farthing Wood. Now, my family know how obsessed I was with The Animals of Farthing Wood. I got all the magazines, I collected all the sticker books, I watched them over and over and over again, I had the videos. I absolutely adored The Animals of Farthing Wood. Basically, if you've not come across it, The Animals of Farthing Wood was a 90s TV series. So, again, a smaller budget. The animation is absolutely beautifully constructed, very realistic. But they do have a bit of issue with sometimes what the movement of the mouth doesn't necessarily match up to what is being said, or you have scale issues with various characters. But it's lower budget. And I don't mind that, because it is absolutely beautifully drawn, and really shows English countryside and everything. So basically, Farthing Wood, where all of these characters live, is being taken over by men. It's being ripped apart, dug up and everything, and made into a load of houses. So all the animals get together and they decide to travel together to a place called White Deer Park, where Toady, the Toad, one of the characters, has recently come back from, and said, I know the way, it's fully protected, and the humans there actually want to help us. They look after us, so we could go there. And of course, they are all different types of animals. Animals who would eat each other and such, and hunt each other usually. And they're like, well, we can't band together and go to this place together. So they all swear an oath that they will never hurt each other and they will protect each other. And travel to White Deer Park. And that's series 1. Series 2 takes place while they're in the park. And series 3 is also in the park, but a lot of it takes place outside, because characters go outside and come back. Series 3, don't even watch, because it's terrible. They completely changed all of the animation style, the writing, everything. It's completely mediocre compared to what it was for series 1 and 2. Series 2 isn't as good as series 1, but it's still pretty decent. But series 1 is fantastic. And I recently saw a review, I will link it in the description, it's absolutely fantastic, of this guy who watched Animals Farthing Wood and describes it as Game of Thrones before there was Game of Thrones, because literally you have no idea which character is going to make it through each episode. And I'm not kidding you, there are those who are run over by cars, poisoned, set fire, speared on thorns, shot, strangled. What else have we got? Yeah, various poisons. They get caught in traps and like get wire pulled, ripping at their throats and everything. Drownings, eaten. There's every possible way that an animal could die. You see in this, like, very rarely old age actually, gets a character. So every single thing possibly under the sun happens to these characters. So yeah, again, incredibly dark things that get presented, and Mr. Pheasant's death is really tragic because Mr. Pheasant in it, he has this wife who he treats appallingly. She's an abused wife, basically, and they have to keep watch at farm, and he doesn't wake up, so she goes and gets killed by the farmer. And Ada is left behind at the farm where they're all sleeping. This is the whole reason why they had to keep watch. And so he goes back because that's where his wife died and everything, and he's so brokenhearted. And when he goes back to find Ada, he finds the wife of the body of his murdered wife cooked on a plate and everything, and he's screaming his head off, and then he gets shot, and it's, oh god, it's really tough to watch. But I'll link that video in because it's absolutely fantastic, his analysis of it and everything. So earlier I said about how there is a film where the classification is rather questionable, and that is Watership Down. Now, this is a U certificate. It's not a U certificate film. I'm sorry. There's even a bird in this who tells the rabbits to piss off. I am not joking. Along with lots of blood, rabbits ripping each other, bleeding heavily. There's this one rabbit who wire gets around its neck as well, like animals father would. But in this one, you get like full eyes popping out of his head, blood spewing out of his mouth, everything out of his neck, all that jazz. Yeah, there's and you see horrific things of hares suffocating to death and stuff like this. So it's a really, really dark animation film, but it's really funny. It's a running kind of joke in my family that if they want to get me to cry, like that, they just have to sing Bright Eyes and I'm gone. And it's because of this film. This film scarred my childhood. It's very, very well drawn. It's drawn animation, and again you get a history in the beginning, which is a rather different style compared to the rest of the film, and it follows these hares who live at Watership, and one of them, there's two brothers, and one of them kind of has these kind of visions, and he has a vision that they're going to get attacked, and the place, the hill, gets completely absorbed in the blood of the hares and everything. And so they decide that they need to leave, and they go off, and it's all about them trying to find a new place and all the various characters they meet along the way. And as I say, there's a rather angry bird who has to hang around with them because he's got a hurt wing, and he tells them to piss off when he first meets them. So yeah, some lovely characters, some very uncomfortable characters, some really nasty characters who, as I say, rip hares apart and like pull off their ears and everything as punishment, and it's really graphic, but it's a very, very well put together film. I would recommend that one, definitely. And the other ones are a piece of English kind of classic. Wallace and Gromit. I adored Wallace and Gromit as a child. These were stop motion animation shorts, which then led to another kind of, a bit of a longer short, and then which led to a film, which followed the life of Wallace and Gromit. Wallace is a man, and Gromit is his pet dog. Wallace, they're both obsessed with cheese. Wallace is smart, but, sort of smart, but he's not as smart as Gromit. Gromit is real fantastic, turned on kind of guy, for his mind. He gets every situation that's going on pretty much, apart from a couple of things. They're both obsessed with cheese and knitting and such, and it's all about their various adventures. Now the first one is called A Grand Day Out, where they want to go somewhere where there's cheese, sort of for a holiday, and they decide to go to the moon because the moon's made of cheese, and there they meet a fridge freezer robot thing, and the various encounters. And their second one, they take in a lodger who is this evil penguin who used to make me cry because he terrified me so much as a child. And then in the third one, Wallace falls in love with a woman who owns a wool shop, and she has a dog called Preston, and who's not very nice at all, and Gromit doesn't like him, and he thinks there's something more sinister here, and it's all about their relationship with Wallace. The Matter of Loaf and Death is about the point where Wallace and Gromit have become bakers, and the load of bakers throughout their area where they live are getting murdered one by one. And it's who's behind the murder, and Wallace falling in love again. And then The Curse of the Weird Rabbit is about Wallace falling in love again, and and how they run a service called Antipesto, which protects the vegetables of the various neighbours in the area and everything. But because there's this big like vegetable festival coming up, and in the course of this going on, people's vegetables start getting attacked, and the sight of a giant bunny rabbit comes to them, and it's all about them finding out who this bunny rabbit is and what their intentions are. So these are perfect, absolutely perfect stop motion animation, British stop motion animation, that kind of brought stop motion animation to the forefront for British animation. They were hugely popular. Nick Parker's gone on to do various other things, like, what's he done? Like Flushed Away. What was the other? It's completely falling out of my head. The other films he's been involved with, but he's done Shaun, who is in the third one, Shaun and the Sheep. There's a picture of Shaun. I absolutely loved Shaun. He had his own series, and then that led to, I think he had like a nephew or something, and the nephew then getting a series and various films and such. So there's been loads of spin-offs here, there, and everywhere. And he's involved in various other films as well. But Flushed Away is pretty decent, one of his films. And talking about stop motion animation, another one which really defined my childhood was The Nightmare Before Christmas. Tim Burton's film. This is absolutely fabulous. It is one of the key things I have to watch at Christmas every single year, which follows a man called Jack Skellington, who he lives in a land called Halloween Land, and he is like considered the scariest one there and everything, and but he feels like there's something missing. There's more to him, and he goes off one day for a walk in the forest and finds these doors to various different lands, and he falls into Christmas land and becomes obsessed with Christmas and decides to take over Christmas, give Santa a rest and take over Christmas, hijack it basically. And it's all about him convincing the people of his land to basically do this. This is incredibly dark as well, especially the Oogie Boogie Man. He's horrible. He's like this big fat sack that's full of maggots and insects and squirming. Oh, it's horrible. But all the characters are incredibly sinister. And the things that they do to Christmas, and everything, it's so dark, it's so sinister, it's so fabulous. Now, there are various animation films that I've come to connect with as an adult, which, kind of in my late teens going into adulthood. And power of animation is that it can really make you see things in a different way. So my first example of that is something that came about from my childhood, and it made me see Shakespeare in a different way. And that's the Shakespeare animated series. This was something which at my school we had all of them on video, and occasionally you would watch one or two of them in English class and talk about it and everything. And it was a way to us to connect with Shakespeare, see Shakespeare in a different light. And each Shakespeare story was basically reduced down to about 15-20 minutes, so they're really short. So I think the longest ones are about half an hour, and so it basically tells you the story. But what's wonderful about these is that every single one of them is a slightly different animation technique. So you've got ones that are stop motion, you've got ones that are just charcoal. The Hamlet one is extraordinary with charcoal drawings. Then you've got, you know, your standard drawings like Julius Caesar and Romeo and Juliet. They're kind of like, you know, your standard animation, hand-drawn animation. Then you've got things like, which are the ones we got here? Oh yeah, Macbeth is very interesting because that is standard animation, but then at the same time you've got all of these magical elements because of the witches and how very wispy and you're not too sure if what you're seeing is reality or is an illusion, which, you know, very much like the story. Is he hallucinating the witches or are they real? That kind of thing. So this really was something when I was about 14, maybe 15, that really made me see Shakespeare in a different way. And to have that taught to me in my school was a really, really amazing thing. And I think it helped me develop my love for Shakespeare. Then you have ones where I was absolutely blown away by, and it's because of other things introducing it to me. Now, it was a few weeks ago now, I read Animal Farm. Absolutely loved it. And online, I could only see that there were two kind of versions that had been made for like TV, for film, or whatever, which were one in the 90s, so the late 90s, where Pete Postlethwaite was a live action thing, very much influenced by Babe, you know, the way in which it was constructed, the way it was made, you know, showing the animals talking, all that jazz, using puppets, that kind of thing. And then there was the 1954 version, the animated version. Again, a U certificate. This is not a U certificate film in the slightest. Which follows the story, all the various characters and everything. But it's haunting. It is truly dark and haunting and shook me up. There's this amazing sequence with Benjamin the donkey, where he realizes that the horse Boxer is being taken away. He's going to the knacker's yard. He's going to be made into glue. It's the glue factory coming to pick him up, and he's so upset. And Boxer doesn't know that this van that he's just been put in is taking him away to die, and Benjamin is running after him and he's screaming and screaming and screaming, and Boxer realises and he tries to kick his way out, but he can't get out, and then the van's gone and he has to, you know, he's running as fast as he can to keep up, but he can't keep up, and finally he just has to give up and say goodbye to his friend. And the way it is animated is extraordinary. Very, very, very hard hitting. And I actually spoke to a colleague of mine, Katie, about it, and she said, I watched it as a kid and it really shook me up. I can understand if people go, oh, it's a youth certificate, it's fine, it's perfectly fine for children. No, it's not. There's some really dark, sinister, horrific stuff, including abuse to animals by humans in various forms in this film. So it's an incredibly hard film to watch. And the next one I'm going to show you, to this very day, completely blows me away. And that I would really, really strongly recommend anyone to watch. And that is Grave of the Fireflies. Now, Japanese animation is only something I really kind of got introduced to about 5-6 years ago, because a colleague who really is a fan of Studio Ghibli, who made Grave of the Fireflies, said, you really need to check out this film. And he gave me his copy, he lent me his copy to watch, and he gave me a few of the other films as well, and said, check them out. And the other films, I was like, oh yeah, they're okay, they're pretty, interesting, but I didn't feel that they really hit me, and I saved Grave of the Fireflies for last. And my God, this slammed me over the head with a sledgehammer. Whenever I watch it, without a doubt, I am bawling my eyes out. It's about a brother and sister who live with their mother in Japan in the 1940s when the Hiroshima bomb hits, and his mum is their mum, should I say, is extremely affected by it. She is badly burned. She's pretty much like entire body is covered in bandages, and it's very clear that she's going to die very soon. And she has, her son look after his little sister, and it's all about them living life after this horrific event has happened, trying to survive and everything, but he's also protecting his sister to not realise really what's going on. And the very opening sequence, you see the brother dead. He's in a train station. He's been lying there for days and no one's realised that he's dead. And you see kind of his spirit sat with his sister, and you don't understand. And there's this whole thing of a can that he's clutching, which the people who take his body away throw away, and you don't understand the significance of that whatsoever until you get to the end of the film. And my God, it hurts so much when you understand what that means. And Grave of Fireflies, it's kind of that I couldn't figure out why it was called that, and then I watched the film and I was like, oh Jesus, it's a representation of life, of souls, of those who were killed, those who are still alive, those fighting for everything, and it just pulled at every possible heartstring there. If you can watch this and not cry, you are not human. I'm sorry, it's not possible. But this is one of the most powerful pieces of animation I have come across ever in my life. I strongly recommend this to anyone. It's extraordinary. And of course, with with our more modern animation, we are able to learn more things about society, about life and everything. And it kind of feels like now the animation has shifted. There are more darker themes coming into animation for children. Now, I'm not saying that, because obviously what I've shown you is incredibly dark, and a lot of it is designed for children, but new elements. It's kind of like it's kind of felt like, well, children are becoming a bit more immune to those kind of things, and there's more of an emphasis on society, on obviously social media, and children being exposed to things. So I think that has kind of made more of an impact in animation over the years. So I've got some animation films here that have really taught about things about society. Now, one of them, I've only got the musical version, so it's not actually the film, because the film is available films are available on Netflix, and I watch them via that. And that's Shrek. Shrek teaches every single person who watches it that all of those Disney kind of stereotypes where the girl has to sit on her butt and wait for a man. The man has to be absolutely good looking and everything, but usually he doesn't have a brain. That you have to meet a certain criteria in order to be validated. It basically bitch slaps that and goes, no. You're free to be whoever you are, whoever you want to be. That is awesome. Be who you are, which is fantastic. It was kind of like the first in a realm of films that started to do this in animation, because then after that you have films like Coraline, a fantastically beautifully constructed stop motion animation film adapting Neil Gaiman's book, and it basically is kind of a predatorial thing. because Coraline, sorry, moves to a new house with her parents, who are far too busy kind of to play with her and everything, and she doesn't like this. Well, she's so uncomfortable. She doesn't like it, and she finds this doorway in her bedroom which leads to an alternate universe where of her world, where everything is perfect, everything's catered for her, everything's beautiful and magical and wonderful, and everyone's attention is on her, and there is this motherly kind of figure there, and but the difference is that everyone has buttons for eyes, and kind of caters to her, and makes her feel so special, and then things start to turn, and she's very predatorial, and it really made me think about adults who prey on children. It really does show you kind of grooming, in a sense, techniques in a way. And Neil Gaiman is an absolute master of in his art and books. If you haven't read any of his books, please do. They are all fantastic. But Coraline takes this kind of predatorial, grooming kind of thing, and brings it into a magical story for children, and that is fantastic because what it teaches children. We also have things like recent Pixar animation Coco, which brought murder into a story as one of an event that happened in the past, which links two characters together, and we get taught it what happened, and we see it happen. It's really graphic. It's a poisoning, just to make it clear, but you actually see, the poison into the glass, and him drink it, and you see him collapse and everything and die. It's really, but obviously it's not like a stabbing or anything, a shooting, not like that, but it's still the fact that it's in this film, and we are watching it, and we know what's going to happen, and to have that as the centre of a child's film, big deal. And two other films, Up taught us, as everyone, and really shocked moviegoers, especially the first 10 minutes, because it showed the power of animation. It made those first 10 minutes with no dialogue or anything, kind of like using techniques in Fantasia to be able to tell a story of two people who met as children, who came together, fell in love, all of the stuff that they went through of not being able to have children, how they moved on from that, and how their life developed, and then one of them dying. It's incredibly moving first 10 minutes of a film, and it showed the power that animation has to make you feel emotion, and really made people sit up and go, right, this is a new way of looking at where Pixar want to go and what they want to do and such. And you have other films, another Disney film, Zootropolis, which brought racism to children and taught them how you've met all these characters, they're absolutely, lovely characters and everything, but because of one little idea that one person has planted, or one animal, should I say in this case, has planted into people's heads, suddenly half the people in Zootropolis are feared of. People have issues sitting next to them in trains and stuff like this, and it really brings racism to children, and that is extraordinary. So I love the fact that animation, especially now, is looking at all of these society-related things and presenting them to children through the art of animation. And it is that thing that I gather, I'm not a parent, but I gather parents have gone through the thing where they had to watch have a Disney film on the loop 50 times a day, kind of thing. But if it's something like this, which is teaching children about society and such, I don't see that as a bad thing. So I'm perfectly happy with it. And to finish off, and I've nearly made it an hour, but it's going to go over the hour mark, but to finish off, I mentioned lots of films there, obviously, as I said, Disney classics as well, but these 3 films, well, 4 technically, because one has a sequel, that I just want to show you are some of my favourite modern, kind of, well, more modern animation. And the first one is the one that has a sequel, and that is How to Train Your Dragon. I've got obviously 1 and 2, 3 is currently in the cinema. The final chapter, I am not ashamed to say, I cried at the final chapter. It was absolutely fantastic. It ended perfectly, exactly what I wanted, and it was a really beautiful closing chapter of a wonderful, wonderful series. And basically this is set in kind of Viking kind of times, and there is this kid who is kind of, he's basically the son of the leader, and he doesn't feel that he that what he's expected to be is who he should be, and dragons are feared throughout where he lives. And but he actually encounters one. He captures a dragon who he calls Toothless, right here, and they form this friendship, and it's all about him learning about dragons, teaching his people, and becoming who he is and standing up for himself. And again, that's another key quality, that you don't have to be the rough, tough guy. You could be the really skinny kid who everyone ignores and thinks is weird and stupid, and be the hero. So it's, again, it's about teaching about being who you are, accepting people for who they are, because obviously Toothless and everything who he who he accepts, sorry, things, you know, teaching other people, being open to things. There's so many different elements in this film, but these films also defined a new animation technique and new ways of using camera, especially with, you know, the movement of the dragons and everything when they're flying, and they have become real proper classics now. And the third film was absolutely extraordinary. The color palette, especially, I mean, the color palette is so strong throughout these films, but the third one is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous color palettes. But yeah, the various different characters, and I love the fact that they're all different shapes and sizes, as well as the kids, as well as the adults. They have their own various thought processes and everything. They have their own personalities, which are very, very distinct. But you can tell that they all absolutely love each other. They're one big family where they all live, and that's absolutely wonderful. That is saying that in a family you can have your own personality, your own thoughts, your own feelings, and you won't be like thrown out or anything. You are loved no matter what in this land, and they are absolutely fantastic. My other two absolutely favourite recent Disney animation, because obviously I had Fantasia and Beauty and the Beast before as my absolute top animation, but these are my favourite recent animations, and they are Brave and Tangled. Now both of these are very separate, because of one is based on a fairy story, and the other one is a completely new story, but at the same time they share a lot of similar qualities. So for example, both of the leading ladies we have here are pretty badass. They both have their own independent mind, independent thoughts. They're both teenagers. They both have the ability to say what they feel and everything. They adore things about life and such. But I especially love Merida in Brave. She is incredibly strong, and I love the fact that Brave is about a relationship of a mother and daughter. Okay, yes, there's this whole thing of possibly Merida getting married, but there's no love story. There's in that sense, it's a love story between a mother and a daughter and their developing relationship, and how when you get to your teen years, you're going to rebel, you're going to do this, that and the other that your mum and dad might not agree with, but it's about the development of who you are and such. But at the absolute epicenter of it is love. And it is a pretty dark story because of this horrible bear character. But it is beautifully shot, and it's obviously Scottish. It's inspired by Scotland and everything, and the way in which Scotland is depicted through the animation of the lands and everything is extraordinary, and I think that's why I absolutely love it. The Celtic feel of it is wonderful. And with Tangled, I love the fact that this has, in kind of like Shrek, where you have contradicting characters, because the princess is not really, you know, your standard princess, your hero is not your standard hero, and all that lot. You can't have that with this. So, because you have things like the leading guy, Flynn Rider, the thief who, you know, he looks absolutely gorgeous, and he, you know, he's the way, he acts a certain way, but in truth, he's this guy called Eugene Fitzherbert who grew up in an orphanage and makes a big deal about who he is in order to hide and mask, has a mask on, as it were, to hide from the truth that he's just this ordinary guy who's been through some bad stuff. That kind of thing. Having that connection is absolutely wonderful. And the fact that, you know, our leading lady, she's weird because her hair can heal people and it glows when she sings. Stuff like that. And they totally accept each other. They totally like each other. They totally love each other. And because of that, I absolutely love them. And I love Pascal, her pet lizard, and our you know, lovely horse who's pretty badass. But it's wonderfully constructed, really, really fantastic way of storytelling, and again bringing modern things into an old fairy story. So right, I'm going to stop now because I think my voice is going to go in a minute. But I just want to say that is why I love animation. The way that it can tell us about society, the way it can tell stories, the way it uses different techniques. And if it wasn't for animation, I think I may not have been interested in dark stories and such as I have grown up to love. Obviously, there were very other things that contributed to why I love dark stories and that, but I think these have a pretty big thing to do with it. And looking back, obviously I've spent many hours watching these films over my childhood and my life and everything, but I don't feel that's wasted. It's taught me about art and made me appreciate something, and I love that. So there you go. So do you love animation films? I'd love to know what you think. You can leave me a comment in the comments box below. You give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely up to you, let you decide. And I hope that if you want to check out any of these, please do. But Grey for Fireflies is my absolute one that I really hope, if you haven't seen it before, that you watch. It's incredibly hard to watch. It's incredibly dark, but go with it and you won't be disappointed. All right, guys. Bye.